times in our nation, it was Marsh and other great times, it was Will Rogers. And at this particular time, it was Dr. Benjamin Franklin. He was the most famous person in the world. A member of the Royal Academy of Sciences, the discoverer of the Gulf Stream, the inventor of numerous things, some of which will be revealed to you tonight. All of his inventions could have been added to the universe. He would accept no money for the works of his mind. He said, now the works of my hand are not hands are not. He made a fortune with his printing business. In fact, he created franchises, and even made so much money that he loved to carry out. He was our ambassador to France. It was critical to that French law. He secured participation of French in the Battle of Yorktown, which made that crushing victory possible. One evening, the British ambassador was at French court, was the French ambassador, and Dr. Franklin, who was the most popular person in France. And the British ambassador rose to the toast and said, George III, the son who provides life to the world. And the French ambassador stood with his glass and said, to King Louis, the moon, who gives us light when we need it. And then everyone turned, of course, to the crotchety old fellow and water and all women around him. Dr. Franklin, he stood up and he said, was to George Washington, the Joshua, who demanded that the sun wouldn't stand still. He was a remarkable person who wrote amazing papers. If you look at the very first edition of the Encyclopedia of Mathematics and Realities, they talk about the interesting experiments of Dr. Franklin and the colonies. He discovered electricity. He discovered the negative positive aspects of it. As I said, it's a slow boat to London. How do I measure the temperature of the water? Discovered the Gulf Stream. Figured that out in a number of things. That's it. Now, where's the key today? Don't try that alone. The second person who tried to replicate Dr. Franklin's experiment like was elected. The key did stop it, thank God, for Dr. Franklin. Some of these things you don't try. So it was said of him that he snatched the lightning from heavens, the scepters of tyrants. Truly the most remarkable and famous man of his day. Encyclopedia Britannica says the summary of his genius was impossible. And we have it here now. So let's welcome Dr. Benjamin Franklin.
God. Well, it's true, and he'd set me down to have a career in the ministry. However, my My interest lay in somewhat more earthly realms, unfortunately, but I still have quite fondness for churches. Yes. Here, on my religion, is a letter that I wrote to my friend Ezra Stiles. Dear Ezra, you desire to know something of my religion. Here is my creed. I believe in one God, creator of the universe, that he governs it by his providence, that he ought to be worshipped, that the most acceptable service we render to him is to do good to his other children, that the soul of man is immortal and will be treated with justice in another life, respecting its conduct in this one. And I also remarked in the letter that I saw some sense in the arguments of those who did not believe in the existence of God, and that I freely admit that the lovely system of morals that Jesus put into place has received various corrupting changes due to the mistaken interpretation of mortal man, but that due to my advanced old age, I expect soon an opportunity of knowing the full truth firsthand. Now, I'm glad, too, that this is a Methodist institution. I'm quite fond of the Methodists. In fact, one of the founders of Methodism, George Whitfield, spoke often in my presence. He actually stayed in my house several times. The Reverend Whitfield was an itinerant missionary, so he rarely spoke in beautiful houses of worship like this. He spoke out in the fields, surrounded by thousands of sinners attempting to awaken their souls. And I always thought that after Reverend Whitfield had spoken, it seemed as if all the world had grown religious because of the power of his mission, his message, and his voice. I shall attempt to emulate Reverend Whitefield, or Whitfield, as he's known both, this evening. However, any comparisons made between the two of us will uncertainly be to my own reference. Let's see. Here. No, that's what I wanted. There's pages from poor Richard's Almanac. Perhaps you've heard of it. Good. I wrote it. I created its fictional author, a Richard Saunders, who was writing these almanacs in order to support his often harping wife. Poor Richard had many simple, wise, and unstated facts about contemporary life, OCU, and I think they're still somewhat contemporary today. Maybe know a few of these. A penny saved is a penny earned. You may delay, but time will not. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And after the day, stop it. Haste makes waste. God helps those who help themselves. Don't cry over spilled milk. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. We're all born ignorant, but one must work hard to remain stupid. Many people die at 25, but they aren't buried until they're 75. Instead of cursing the darkness, light a candle. Early to bed and early to rise, being ignorant is not so much of a shame as being unwilling to learn. The person who deserves most pity is a lonesome one on a rainy day who does not know how to breathe. When you're testing to see how deep the water is, never use 2 feet. Certainly ends in shame. Any fool can criticize, condemn, and complain, and most fools do. He that is good for making excuses is seldom good for anything else. Never leave until tomorrow what you can do today. Fish and visitors both smell after 3 days. The problem with doing nothing is not knowing when you're finished. 2 can keep a secret if one of them is dead. A learned blockhead is a greater blockhead than an ignorant one. And the only thing that's more expensive than education In beer, there is freedom, and in water, there is bacteria. Oh, yes, one of my favorite quotes about one of my favorite things. Beer is the proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. Of course, that also reminds me of another provable fact. If beer is the proof that God loves us, the gout is the proof that he does not approve of us imbibing in beer too much. For those of you who don't know, gout is an inflammatory disease of the legs and feet, of which I was much suffering in my later years, although not to my the common belief is that high living, by which I mean too much red meat and too much liquor and not enough exercise, bring on attacks of the gout. Well, my gout got so bad on life that I wrote this particular piece about it. Dialogue between the gout and Mr. Franklin. Midnight, October 27, 17. Let's forward a bit. 1718. Mr. Franklin. What have I done to bear these cruel sufferings? The gout. Many things. You've ate and drank too freely and too much indulged those legs of yours in indolence. Who is it that accuses me? It is I, even I, the gout. What? The enemy in person? No, not your enemy. No, I repeat it, my enemy. For you would not only torment my body to death, but ruin my good name. You reproach me as a glutton and a drinker. Now, the world that knows me will allow that I am neither the one nor the other. The world may think as it pleases, but I very well know the quantity of meat and drink proper for a man who takes reasonable exercise would be too much for another who never takes any. Oh, for heaven's sake, leave me. And I promise faithfully never more to play chess, but to take exercise faithfully and live temperately. I know you too well, Franklin. You promise fair, but after a few months' fair health, you will return to your old habits. Let us finish this account, and I will be gone, but I leave you with an assurance of visiting you again at the proper time and place, for my object is not your pain, but your good. And now you are sensible that I am your real friend. When President Henry approached me about coming to visit you, he suggested, I think quite likely, that I read to you from some of my collected writings as a way of introducing myself to you. So I gathered a bit here and pulled a few things together. You know, you may well have read about me in the history books or seen me on the back of a $100 bill. Well, it's quite something to see yourself on the back of a $100 bill. But a $100 bill, or a C note, as you call it, or a history book does not tell you everything you need to know about a man. Hereby, I shall indulge the inclination so natural in all men to be talking of themselves and their own past actions, and perhaps I shall really gratify my own vanity. Indeed, I scarce ever heard or saw the introductory words, without vanity I may say, but some vain thing immediately followed. Most people dislike vanity in others for the share they have themselves, but I give it fair call whenever I meet it, being persuaded that it is often productive of good in the possessor, and in others who are within his sphere of influence. And it would not be altogether absurd if a man were to thank God for his vanity among the other comforts of his life. And I did not always hold this view of vanity. In fact, in my youth, I conceived of a bold and arduous project of arriving at moral perfection. I wished to live without committing any fault at any time. I would conquer all that either natural inclination, or custom, or company might lead me into. Now I knew, or at least thought I knew, what was right and what was wrong, and I did not see why I might not always do the one and never do the other. After much long, penetrating, and arduous thought, as only a young man can perform. I wrote down a list of necessary virtues to 13, along with a brief description of their basis. I'd like to read them for you now, if you don't mind. Number 1 virtue, temperance. Eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. Silence. Speak not but what may benefit others or yourself. Avoid trifling conversation. 3, order. Let all things have their places. Let each part of your business have its time. Resolution. Resolve to perform when you ought, perform without fail what you should resolve. Frugality. Make no mistake to do good to others or yourself, i.e., waste nothing. Number 6, industry. Lose no time. Be always employed in something useful. Cut off all unnecessary actions. Sincerity. Use no hurtful deceit. Think innocently and justly, and if you speak accordingly. Justice. Wrong none by doing injuries or omitting the benefits that are your duty. Moderation. Avoid extremes. Forbear resenting injuries so much as you think they deserve. Cleanliness. Tolerate no uncleanliness in body, clothes, or habitation. Tranquility. Be not disturbed in tranquil or in accidents, calm or unafraid. Chastity. Rarely use venery, but for health or offspring, never to dullness, weakness, or the injury of your own or another's peace or reputation. And finally, humility. Imitate Jesus and Socrates. In reality, there is perhaps no one of our natural passions so hard to subdue as pride. Disguise it, struggle with it, beat it down, stifle it, mortify it as much as one pleases. It is still alive, and will every now and then peep out and show itself. You'll see it perhaps very often in this speech that I'm giving you tonight. And even if I could conceive that I had completely overcome it, I would probably be proud of my humility. One point in my life respecting this list of virtues, I had vowed to eat a diet of only vegetables, because I was convinced that eating the flesh of any animal was cruel and unnecessary and could not be virtuous. Now, in my first sea voyage away from home, Boston, being becalmed off Block Island, these sailors set about catching cod hauled out great men. Now, hitherto I had stuck to my resolution of not eating animal food, and on this occasion I considered the taking of every fish a kind of unprovoked murder, since none of them had or ever could do any injury to us that might justify this slaughter. All this seemed very reasonable, and of course a path full of virtue. But I had formerly been a great lover of fish. When they came on out frying pans, so hand well. I dined sometimes in principle and inclination, till I recollected that when the fish were opened, I saw smaller fish taken out of their stomachs. Well, then I thought, if you eat one another, I don't see why I may eat you. And so I dined on the cod very happily and continued to eat with the other people, returning only now and then to my vegetable diet. It's a very convenient thing to be a reasonable creature, yes? Since it enables one to find or make a reason for doing anything one doesn't mind. Now, when I scoured my collected musings looking for something that might satisfy something in the order of a philosophy of life, I came across this short story called The Whistle, which I think speaks a lot about my philosophy of mankind, about happiness, and sometimes it's lack thereof among men. Now, you all have to know that among the founders, those of us that wrote the Declaration and the Constitution, happiness was a very large subject of concern. Yes, well, you know, the Declaration of Independence says that every American citizen has the right to pursue happiness. The only problem is you have to catch it yourself. The whistle. When I was a child, 7 years old, a shop where they sold toys for children, and being charmed with the sound of a whistle that I met in the way in the hands of another boy, I voluntarily offered and gave up all my money for one. I then came home and went whistling all over the house and watched my whistle, and of course stood in my happy family. My brothers and sisters and cousins, understanding the bargain that I had made, told me that I had given 4 times for it as much as it was worth. They put me in mind of what good things I could have bought with the rest of the money, and they laughed at me so much for my folly that I cried with vexation, and the reflection gave me more chagrin than the whistle gave me pleasure. This, however, was afterwards of use to me, the impression continuing on in my mind, so that often when I was tempted to buy some unnecessary thing, I said to myself, don't give too much for a whistle, and save my money. This, however, as I grew up and came into the world and observed the actions of men, gave me the thoughts that I met many, very many, who gave too much for their whistle. When I saw one too ambitious for court favor, sacrificing his time and his mental abilities, his repose, his virtue, and perhaps his friends to attain it, I said to myself, oh, this man is too much for his whistle. When I saw another, fond of popularity, constantly employing himself in political bustles, neglecting his own affairs and ruining them by that neglect, he paid, indeed, too much for his whistle. If I knew a miser who gave up every kind of comfortable living, all the pleasure of doing good to others, all the esteem of his fellow citizens, and the joys of benevolent friendship, all for the sake of accumulating wealth, poor man, said I, you pay too much for yours. When I met a man of pleasure, sacrificing every laudable improvement of the mind or of his fortune to mere corporeal sensations, and ruining his health in the pursuit of mistaken man, says I, you are providing pain for yourself instead of pleasure, and you paid too dear for your whistle. If I see one fond of appearance, or fine clothes, fine houses, fine furniture, all of his fortune, for which he contracts debts and ends his career in the prison, alas, says I, he paid dear, very dear for his whistle. When I see a beautiful, sweet-tempered girl married to an ill-natured brute of a husband, what pity, said I, that she should pay so much for a whistle. In short, I can see that great part of the miseries of mankind are brought upon them by the false estimates they've made of the value of things, and by their giving too much for their whistles. I see. Days from poor Richard's. Oh, my neck. This is one of Richard's more whimsical exercises. It's an alphabetical order of a number of different ways that he's heard say the same thing, that a fellow's drunk. He called it a drinker's dictionary. He's addled. He's afflicted. He's bungee. He's big, he's boozy, he bows, the burdocks, busty, buzzy. He's cramped, he's cracked, he's cherry merry, tasted and cellar. He's got a dish, he's dipped his bill, he's wet both his eyes, he's foxed, fuddled, flushed, fuzzled, he's dizzy as a goose, he's got the glanders, he's got by the head, oh, he's got on his little hat. He knows not the way home. He's jolly, janky, juicy, he's been to Jericho. He's had his kettle, he's seen the French king, he's lordly, he's light, happy, and limber, he sees to whom? He's ate the coconut, he's oiled and overset, he's smelt of an onion, he's among the Philistines, he's among the Philippians, he's contending with the Pharaoh, he's rocky, ragged, rich, raised, he's found religion, he's lost his rudder, he's stitched, he's strong, he's stewed, stuffed, soaked, and soft. He's as drunk as David's sow. He's thawed. He's got the vapors. He's out of the way. The malt is above the water. April 15th, 1747. Gentlemen reading a newspaper entitled the Daily Advertiser in clubs and coffee houses in 18th century London came across a story called The Speech of Miss Polly Baker. In it they learned who a new woman, Polly Baker, who was being accused for the 5th time of having a bastard child, which was a very serious criminal offense. Her very wise, thoughtful, and moving defense was published in its entirety. May it please the honorable bench to indulge me a few words. I am a poor, unhappy woman who have no money to fee lawyers to plead for me, being hard put by it to get a total living. She freely admitted the crime against the existing law, but said, I take the liberty to say that I think this law by which I am published is both unreasonable in and of itself, and particularly severe with regard to me, who've always lived an inoffensive life in the neighborhood where I was born, and defy my enemies to say I ever wronged man, woman, or child. She goes on to argue. Well, you are all pleased to admit that I don't lack sense, but I must be stupid to the last degree, not to prefer the honorable state of wedlock to the condition I live in. I always was, and still am, willing to enter into it. I doubt not my behavior relatives, having all the industry, frugality, fertility, and skill in economy appertaining to a good wife's character. I defy any person to say I ever refused an offer of that sort. On the contrary, I readily consented to the only proposal of marriage that was ever made to me, which was when I was a virgin. But too easily confiding in the person's sincerity that made it, I happily lost my own honor by trusting to his, for he got me with child, and then forsook me. That very person you all know. He's now become a magistrate in this county, and I had hopes that he would have appeared this day on the bench and had endeavored to moderate the court in my favor. Then I should scorn to have mentioned it. But I must complain now, as it is unjust and unequal, that my betrayer and undoer, the first cause of all my faults and miscarriages, if they must be deemed to be such, should be advanced to honor and power in the same government that punishes my misfortunes with whipping and infamy. She wonders if the following is the actual act of a criminal. No, I have brought five children into this world at the risk of my life. I have maintained them with my own industry, without burdening the township, and I could have done it better had it not been the heavy charges and fines that I have paid. Can it be a crime in the nature of things, I mean, to add to the number of the king's subjects in a new country that really wants people? I should think it rather praiseworthy than punishing action. I have debauched no other woman's husband, nor incited any innocent youth. These things I have been charged with, nor anyone has the least complaint against me, except perhaps the minister or the justice, because I have had children without being married, by which they missed the wedding. She goes on to denounce what she considers the real criminals, if they be such in these cases. Your Honor, take into your wise consideration the greatly growing number of bachelors in the country, many of whom, from the mean fear of the expense, is theirs not a greater offense against the public good than mine? Compel them then, by the law, either marry or pay double the fine of fornication every year. What was the poor young woman do, whom custom forbid to solicit the men, and who cannot force themselves upon a husband, when the law take no care to provide them any, and yet severely punish them if they do their duty without them? And she concludes with this. It is the law, therefore. 'Tis the law itself that is guilty of all these barbarities and murders. Repeal it, gentlemen. Let it be expunged forever from your books. And on the other hand, yes, gentlemen, I venture to call it a duty. 'Tis the duty of the first and great command of nature and of nature's God. Increase and multiply. A duty from the steady performance of which nothing has ever been able to deter me. For the sake of it, I have hazarded the loss of public esteem, and frequently incurred public disgrace and punishment. and therefore ought, in my humble opinion, instead of whipping, to have a statue erected in my honor. Now, the story is not long, tells the point that I actually received that statue in her honor. But does that more extraordinary effect. Immediately after she stopped speaking, all the charges against her were dropped, and the very next day, one of her judges proposed marriage to her. Good. The Polymaker story was reprinted in newspapers in New York and Boston, Philadelphia, other papers in London, and all across England, France, and Italy. It was much discussed by the intelligentsia of the Western Europe at the time. In France, you know French, she was held up as a revolutionary heroine, fighting against unjust laws of reason and nature behind her. The Abbé Raynal, who was a very, very well-known philosopher and writer at the time in France, actually wrote a paper about her called Le Philosophie Pauline. And news of her speech reached as far as the court of Catherine the Great in Russia. Now you're probably wondering why I told you the whole story. Well, the truth is, despite all the hoopla, Polymaker never existed. She was an elaborate literary fiction. Meant in order to draw attention to some very stupid and very ill thought out and very unjust laws, and also to explode many of the preconceived notions that we have about women. I wrote the Polymaker story. Years later, when I met the Abbé Raynal in Paris, and I informed him that the Polymaker was my fiction, he seemed quite downfallen, crestfallen, one might even say at first, but then he rallied himself with this thought. He said, well, my dear Franklin, I would much rather relate your stories than another man's truths. Yes, for the first and the last time I used literary fiction as a way to fight against the seeming injustices. But I think that the greatest contributions that I've made to the cause of justice were the work that I did in writing the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And with your humble pleasure, I'd like to end our evening's discussion with those two documents. Now, when the conflict between Great Britain and the colonies began, I held out hope that a peaceful solution would be found. In fact, as late as 1774, I was in London trying to help find that peaceful solution, but in 1774, it finally occurred to me how completely closed-minded the English power was, and how completely bloody-minded the English crown was. And so I left London and came back to this country, promising never again to make peace. Now, I've had a very multifaceted, one might say, view of the afterlife and the nature of God. But one thing I had never been able to wrap my mind around was the idea of a vengeful God sending punishment down upon mankind. Does that seem to make much sense to me? However, in 1774, and for a few years afterwards, I prayed to a vengeful God because it did not seem right to me that King George, for all his cruelty, would not in the end end up burning in hell. Now, the Declaration was written primarily by three of us: Thomas Jefferson, myself, and John Adams, and most of the world's Jeffersons. Adams, he was an unpleasant man, but none of this, and by this I mean our American experiment, would have happened were it not for his tenaciousness, generally bullying people into doing what he wanted. The Irish took along to add a little of the gentlewisdom of poor Richard document. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Error. No, I thought it was important that it be stated up front that the rights that we were demanding, came to us from nature. They were not given to us by a king or a parliament or some government. They were not derived from some philosophy out of Roman Stoicism. They did not even come to us from God, but from the ever-present laws of the natural world. Now, I thought that was very important to state right up front, because it's not what I knew after I was dead. Some fool would come along and figure he could just give those rights away. And of course, I get some very nervous congressmen to agree to sign them. They who could give up essential liberty to obtain deserve neither liberty nor safety. Gentlemen, we must all hang together, or assuredly we will all hang separately. And luckily enough, they did sign that document, and we had ourselves a nation. But the Declaration of Independence was not the only document that we needed. 10 years later, the United States hung precariously on the edge of collapse. September 17, 1787. Very important day in the history of this country. That was the day the Constitutional Convention adjourned, having signed the document under which we have been ruled and governed quite peacefully for over 2 centuries. Now, the United States at this time was a very different nation than it is today. There were over 4 million citizens, 13 states. Philadelphia, where the convention was held, with its booming 40,000 inhabitants, was the biggest city in all these United States. 55 delegates from 12 states. Rhode Island refused to send any delegates. Rhode Island. Later, for 119 days, one of the hottest summers on record, to write and produce the American Constitution. Now, I attempted to attend every single day of the convention I could. I had terrible gout summer. And even on the days where I could attend, I couldn't walk. So I had to be carried from my house in a sedan chair, carried by 4 convicts that I borrowed from a local prison. Now, in the chamber, there were many great Americans, names that you would know. George Washington was there, Alexander Hamilton was there. But 2 of our greatest voices were gone. John Adams was in London, Thomas Jefferson was in Paris. Both of them striving to put economic trade deals together to keep the tottering American economy afloat. Their voices are so useful in the writing of the Declaration of sort of black to mist in action. There were many differing opinions about what our Constitution should be. Many painful compromises forced upon all of us. Some days it seemed the convention would just fall apart from all the anger and disjointed disagreement. Some days delegates would storm out of the room, oftentimes not stopping their storming until they ended up back in their own original states, never to be seen again. In one of those moments where it seemed the convention might falter, I arose and spoke. Mr. President, the small progress that we've made after 4 or 5 weeks close attendance and continual reasoning to each other, our different sentiments on almost everywhere. Several of the last groups, as many knows as I is, we think, a melancholy proof of imperfection of the human understanding. We indeed seem to feel our own lack of political wisdom. Some have been running around in search. We've gone back to ancient history for models of government and examined the different forms of those republics, which have been formed with seeds of their own dissolution. Now they don't exist. And we view modern states all around Europe and find none of their constitutions suitable to our circumstances. In this situation of necessity, groping as we are in the dark to find political truth and scarcely able to distinguish the views presented to us. How has it happened, sir, We had to be unanimous in our agreement with this Constitution so that we could take it up among our constituents and have their respect for it. On the final day of the convention, my gout was too terrible for me to attend, so I wrote a speech, and I sent it on in my place to be read by a fellow delegate, Judge Wilson. Had I been there, it might have sounded something like this. Mr. President, I confess there are several parts of this Constitution which I do not at present approve. But I'm not sure that I will never approve them. For having lived long, I've experienced many instances where being obliged by better information or fuller consideration to change opinions, even on important subjects, for which I once thought right, but later found otherwise. It is therefore the older I grow, the more apt I am to doubt my own judgment and pay more respect to the judgment of others. Most men, indeed, as well as most sects in religion, think themselves in possession of all truth, and that whenever anybody differs from them, they are so far in error. Mrs. Steele, Protestant, in a dedication tells the Pope that the only difference between our churches in their opinions of the certainty of their doctrines is that the Church of Rome is infallible, and the Church of England is never wrong. But though many private persons think almost as highly of their own infallibility as of their sect, few express it so naturally as a certain French lady I know, who in a dispute with her sister said, "I don't know how it happened, sister, but I meet with nobody but myself who's always in the right." In these sentiments, sir, I agree to this Constitution with all its faults, if they are such, because I think a general government necessary for us, and there's no form of government but what may be a blessing to the people if well administered, and believe, Father, that this is likely to be well administered for a course of years, and can only end in despotism, as other forms have done before it, when the people shall become so corrupted as to need a despotic government, being incapable of any other. I doubt, too, whether any other convention we can obtain may be able to make a better constitution. It astonishes me, sir, to find this system approaching so near to perfection as it does, and I think it will astonish our enemies, who are waiting with confidence to hear that our councils are confounded like those of the builders of Babel, and that our states are on the point of separation, only to meet hereafter for the purpose of cutting one another's throats. Thus I consent, sir, to this Constitution, because I expect no better, and because I'm not sure that it's not the best. The opinions that I have had of its errors, I sacrifice to the public good. I've never whispered a syllable of them abroad. Within this walls they were born, and here they shall die. If every one of us, in returning to our constituents, were to report the objections he's had to, and endeavor to gain partisans in support of them, we might prevent it being generally received, and therefore lose all the salutary effects and great advantages resulting naturally in our favor among foreign nations as well as among ourselves from our real or apparent unanimity. On the whole, sir, I cannot express a wish that every member of this convention who may still have objections to it would with me, on this occasion, doubt a little of his own infallibility, to make manifest our unanimity. Put his name upon the instrument. And to our good and great fortune, the very next day, 39 delegates, including myself, representing 12 states, except Rhode Island, signed this document, and we took it abroad and allowed our handiwork to first be shown to the nation. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of our liberty for ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. After signing the document, all went outside the hall. I was approached by a very nervous woman who I know she's the wife of the mayor of Philadelphia. She said, Dr. Franklin, what have you done to us? What kind of government have you given us? Is it a republic or is it a monarchy? I said, my dear lady, it's a republic. If you can keep it. My sometimes she answered quite over the head, because I don't believe she read much history. But I had quite a lot. And I have known that every republic, every attempted democracy the world had ever known, both in modern eras and back into ancient times, even before the Christian days, had all failed. All of them. And they had all failed for one quite clear and cogent reason. They had failed because the people of them had abdicated their responsibility. I believe my time is nearly up. I think you've all suffered through my time quite a lot. But if I might ask you for just a few moments longer for an old man to reflect on an act of aging, I would greatly appreciate it. Life's biggest tragedy is that we get old too soon and wise too late. I wake up every morning at 9 and grab for the morning paper. Then I look at the obituary page. If my name is not on it, I get up. There will be plenty of time to sleep once you do. Towards the end of my life, Congress appointed Thomas Jefferson to come replace me as the ambassador to the French court. When he arrived at my house in Paris, Jefferson found me 78 years of age, sitting on a couch, surrounded by beautiful madames and mademoiselles kissing and being kissed. Jefferson wondered if these benefits might be transferred to the new ambassador. I thought about it for a few moments and then I shook my head and I said, I'm sorry, Tom, you're far too young. The last letter that I ever received was 7 days before my death, 84 years of age. If to be venerated for benevolence, if to be admired for talents, if to be esteemed for patriotism, if to be beloved for philanthropy can gratify the human mind, you have the pleasing consolation to know that you have not lived in vain. Be assured that as long as I retain my memory, you will be thought of with respect, veneration, and my your sincere friend, George Washington. I am, of course, born from this earth, but I, from the depths of my heart, cannot tell you how proud I am of what we accomplished at one of the Hall Sunday in Philadelphia all those years ago. It was not accomplished without all the pains of birthing a new nation. And it will not continue if each and every American does not take the personal responsibility to seek its victories. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you continued joy of your republic. If you